But we are hoping that you'll be able at some point to park and to explore the tools, because I will be showing you how to do it. And I think the easiest way to learn a tool is actually by doing it. And when, at least for me, when I just watch someone, I always think, oh, I'll do that later. And then I never end up doing it. So I'm hoping that everyone will feel comfortable actually doing the steps as we go. Lily, thank you. She has added the slides for this presentation. Feel free to grab those slides. That way you'll have the links to everything. If you can't, that's okay. We can put up the other little links as we go as well in the chat. But this will also give you access to those slides later when you want to do this again and again. So let's go ahead and get started. This seems like kind of a daunting agenda, but it's actually just little steps along the way. So after some introductions, we'll be talking about corpus tools generally. What are corpus tools? Why do we use them? Talking about AntConc, so what type of corpus tool is AntConc? And then we'll get started. So I'll have everyone who can download AntConc. It is free, there's no sign up, it's safe, it's easy. So I'm hoping everyone will be able to go ahead and download AntConc. We'll create a word list. We'll explore quick, which are keywords in context. That's basically just sample sentences with words. We'll explore n-grams, find collocates, and talk about applications and activities along the way. Today, I'll be giving you a set of texts that you can practice with, but at the end, I'll talk about how you can prepare your own texts so you can do the same thing with whatever texts you have in your class. So that's where we're headed today. Just a little bit of information about myself. I'm the Associate Director of English Language Support Programs in the Department of Linguistics at Boise State University. So I am actually in Idaho now after many years in California, but I couldn't leave CATESOL even when I got this job in Boise. So I'm still an active member of CATESOL. I'm the co-coordinator for the CATESOL Material Writers Interest Group and the co-assistant coordinator for the Corpus-Informed Research and Teaching Interest Group. And Lily, who is with us here today, is the other co-assistant coordinator. So that's just a little bit about myself. I am seeing some, yes, okay, that's just you, Lily, in the chat. I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything, but thanks for those chat messages in there for everybody. Okay. So let's get started with just a general overview of what corpus tools are. And of course, to try to figure out what a corpus tool is, we have to think first about what a corpus is. Would anyone like to unmute themselves and take a stab at a definition? It doesn't have to be an elegant definition, but just a definition of what a corpus is. This is not a test. Nobody will be graded on it.
It's a body of texts that can be run through a computer, and computer, depending on how it's programmed, can do all sorts of things with that body of text.
Excellent. I love that definition. I think Randy Reppin said, in addition to it being a body of text, it's a systematic collection of texts, which I think is an important thing to note. That and what is systematic? It basically means there's a method to the madness. When you, it's not just this random assortment of text that you throw in. You think beforehand, what is it? What kind of language do I want to look at? And then based on the kind of language that you want to look at, you choose your texts. And keep in mind that those texts can be oral or written. A lot of times when we think of text, the first thing that comes to mind is something that we read, but a text can also be oral. So you can have a corpus of TED Talks, which is just transcripts from TED Talks. You can have a corpus of lectures, like classroom lectures. You can have a corpus of political speeches. So really, it can be any type of text. So with that in mind, what would you say is a corpus tool?
I'd say anything that allows us to analyze those texts.
Absolutely. Anything that we can use to analyze those texts. And the types of analysis that we can do are very broad. There are a lot of different things that we can do to look at that. Some people, they want to look at pauses in a corpus of oral texts. How often do people pause when they're speaking? And how long do they pause? That's going to take a special collection of texts to do that analysis. Today, we're going to be using AntConc, which will allow us to look at vocabulary and a little bit the grammar, because really it's hard to distinguish, I think, between what is vocabulary and what is grammar, because when you're looking at a word, so often you're looking at how it's used in a sentence, and that starts to get into the territory of grammar.
And,
so
and if I may,
yes,
sorry, may I? I'm
Yeah.
interested in, because this is my perspective, and that is the analysis through these tools, but then also as much a systematic or programmatic synthesis of that analysis almost as quickly into, say, activities. So I mean,
Yes.
I'm thinking of that transformation step as well.
Absolutely. And of course, there are some people who are very interested in the theoretical, or let's kind of try to dissect what is the language here. But as an instructor myself, I'm always interested in practical applications. So what do we do with this information? Is that what you were thinking of?
Yes, absolutely.
Good. I'm glad you've come to the right place, because what we'll be doing along the way, I'll be showing you 3 main things that you can do with AntConc. And along the way, we'll be talking about what you do once you have that information. What activities can you develop? And we'll be talking, even though I have a specific group of texts that we'll be working with today, as you'll see, when we start talking about activities, we're going to transfer it to different types of situations. So if you have adult students in your class, if you have like high school students, if you have university students, if you have low intermediate or advanced students, you can use these tools, and you can develop activities with this tool. And so along the way, I'm hoping all of you will be thinking about your particular teaching context, and when you give examples, if you could relate it to your teaching context, that would be great. And I will be doing that as well. And if I'm not, then please just go ahead and interrupt and say, hey, well, what about if I'm teaching in a high school? What do I do with this? That would be, it's a great to always be thinking about the different places that you can be using this in.
Great.
So the next question is, what corpus tools have you heard of, and what corpus tools have you used?
I've used and word profiler.
Well, I gave a workshop on COCA a couple months ago, so one would certainly hope that I've used that.
Yes.
Yeah, me too. It's my landing page now. I gave a workshop related to LexTutor, so Tom Cobb has a few embedded in his site.
Absolutely, yeah.
I also, I think it was at our annual conference last year, gave a little workshop on SCEL and Lingual. I'll write those in the chat in case people are interested in looking at them later.
Yeah.
And Lily, you've also talked about Sketch Engine.
Yep. Yeah, SCEL is the like language learner user-friendly version of Sketch Engine, and Sketch Engine is more for the research side. So depending on what people are interested in, they might want to check out one or both of those.
And you know, if I may, one thing, I don't know if any of us has this background. I mean, I just have a glimmer of this connection that, you know, we're here in the domain of linguistics and pragmatic applied linguistics and teaching. But the thing that really interests me is just how far computer science has gone in natural language processing, because they started with all these corpora. And, you know, we're using this data. And of course, these questions, as you raised earlier, of, you know, what did they put into those corpora, you know, and how does that, you know, inform what their very advanced tools are. I'm interested in how, you know, we might circle back around to that or gain perspective on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm hoping we'll have time to talk a little bit more about the theory behind it all. If we don't, and the idea of, you know, how the texts that you choose are going to influence your results, and how that has to be really intentional. I'm hoping we'll have time at the end to talk about that. If we don't, just so that you know, I will be, yes, that's what I was going to say, Lily. We have a Corpus Corner coming up, and that would be a great topic for it. So to be continued. I just want to come back though to AntConc and make sure that we have time to go through some of those steps for AntConc today. So the last question I have for you is, why do we use Corpus tools?
I would say one reason is because our intuitions about language are just fantastically wrong. Like when we see the actual data, it's pretty striking.
Yes, and in fact, usually the first, well, for me anyway, I can't speak for everyone, but for me, the initial reaction is, what? This has got to be wrong, or wait a minute, and I go looking for the data that I expected to find. It's got to be in here somewhere, and it does take me a moment to kind of take that step back and say, okay, this is what I found. And what's so interesting is the fact that it's not what you expect. That's why we do it, because it's not what we would expect. So great. Thank you, Lily. All right. So with AntConc in particular, because, and I mean that the answer was so spot on, Lily. It's because our intuition is not right generally when it comes to language, but that means a lot of things, because we use different tools with like COCA or AntConc or LexTutor and all of the different things that LexTutor does. We use them for different reasons. So if we're going to be focusing just on AntConc today, what can you do with it and why? Well, you can use AntConc to analyze text, spoken or written, that you're using in class. So again, you can use it to analyze all kinds of text for all kinds of reasons, but my focus here today is really applying it in the classroom. As an instructor, that's what's most interesting for me. And I would be happy to talk about the research side of things, maybe at a Corpus Corner in the future. Or you might be thinking as we go, oh yeah, this could be for research too. So one thing that you're going to get out of AntConc is what words are in your text. Quite simply, what are the words? How many times do the words appear? That's pretty important. If a word comes up just one time versus it comes up 20 times in your text, we have a difference in perhaps in importance. And so it's good to know also how often the words appear. In how many texts do the words appear? So you might just be uploading one text. For example, you are teaching a novel in class, and so you just upload a novel. That's the one text. Or maybe in your class, you're using a book with different short stories, and you want to upload all of the short stories that you're using in your class, and you want to know what words appear in all of those stories. Well, AntConc will tell you not only how often they appear in all of the texts combined, it will also tell you how many texts it comes up in, because that's also important. Is one word coming up 20 times, but just in one of the short stories that you're using? Or is it really systematic in all of the texts? One of the things that I think I would really like to study this more, it's an area I don't think has been developed, and I could see it being really useful. Shara, when you were talking about your student group, I thought, you know, a lot of times we teach people who come to the US as refugees, or people who come as immigrants, but with other status. And they have to go through a lot of documents. They have to read those documents, they have to sign the documents, they have to fill out forms. What is the vocabulary in those documents? If we had a list and said, okay, these are like the 20 documents that everybody has to go through when they come into this country. And then we put it into AntConc. AntConc can tell us, here are the words that appear in all of those documents. And these are the words that come up in every single document. And those are the ones that you can really focus on in class. Not only do you know what words, but you also know some other tidbits of information that we will be getting at shortly. So this is something, I mean, I certainly use it in my classes at the university. I see lots of uses in adult education. I see lots of uses in high school. If you've got any kinds of text, a textbook, additional material, if you're doing a listening and speaking class and you've got a bunch of TED Talks, put all of the transcripts for your TED Talks into a corpus and see what words are appearing frequently. Yes, and Lily, keep adding out those ideas. That's great. No, that's wonderful. It's great. And also feel free to unmute yourself as we go too, everyone. So that's one thing that you can do with AntConc. You can also find out where those words are in your texts. So it will give you sample sentences. And that's great because often, at least when I started out as a teacher, you know, I thought, okay, this is the vocabulary I'm going to teach. Now what sentence am I going to make up with this word? Which can be fine, but if you are taking sample sentences from the text that you're using, you're really reinforcing not just the sentence, you're reinforcing the word, you're reinforcing the full sentence, and you're also reinforcing the types of words that frequently come with that target word, words that are collocates, for example. So a frequent collocation would be when you have two words that often come together in the same sentence, in the same phrase. We'll talk more about those later. And AntConc will also tell you n-grams. N-grams are in a way similar to collocations, but they're 2 or 3 or 4 words that are a lexical phrase, a fixed phrase. A collocation is going to be your key term, and then this other term that often comes with it, but it could be before the key term, it could be after the free term. It doesn't have a fixed placement. And I'll give you some examples in just a moment. So those are some of the things that you can do with AntConc. Why might this information be useful? We will be coming more to this when we have some examples, but any ideas off the top of your head? Why would you want to know the words in your text, sample sentences, collocations, and n-grams?
Because writing your own sample sentences is really annoying and often fake. It's nice to have like real sentences to use.
Yes. Emmanuel, you have your hand up.
I would say also to be informed about the frequent collocations and not teach a word only like in isolation, but teach the words that come with that word very often.
Absolutely. How many times do I have students who know the word, but when they use it, it just doesn't sound natural because they don't use it with a collocate that is actually frequently used. Good. So those are some examples. What texts might you want to analyze for your class? And again, after we do this, you'll probably have some other ideas, but I like to ask right at the outset because I think it's interesting to think, for your class, what would be useful?
I think in my case, my class reads about 3 to 4 texts per unit, and they have 3 units. So maybe for each unit, I can look at the most frequent words and choose those words instead of, just choosing them out of my own intuitions.
Right, great. Okay, well, we'll come back to these questions when we get to the end after you've seen a little bit more how it works. And I will give you kind of like a sneak preview for some of them. Determine what vocabulary to target in your class. So that's something both Lily and Emmanuel you mentioned. Find patterns and similarities in the words in your texts. So you might find, for example, that in your text you have some near synonyms like children and kids or family and household, and you can start to think, oh, what's the difference between family and household? What's the difference between children and kids? Food and meals, kind of a similar idea, but not quite a synonym. So you can be looking at the types of words and thinking about contrasting some of the words that are coming up in the same text. You might also be looking at word families. So you might have words like security, insecurity, and insecure all come up in your text. And if you see that, you could say, ooh, how about a word table where I can explore word families with the students, depending on their level, of course. You can get real sample sentences so you don't have to invent them, as Lily mentioned. You can find frequent collocations, so you can introduce common phrases and expressions like food and security. That was like Emmanuel mentioned. You can find frequent n-grams or for other lexical and grammatical patterns. So here with this example, you might see a little bit better the difference between a collocation and an n-gram. So an example from the text that we're going to be looking at today would be access to. So having a noun followed by a particular preposition, for example, that's going to come up in the n-gram. It's always access to. You can't put the to before access. And that's important also for students to be learning that when they learn access, right away, they should be learning access to, so they know not only what the word means, but how to use it. So that's just a little background on AntConc and what is possible, at least what we're doing with it today. And I'd like to go ahead and get started and just dig into it. I have a link to a Google Drive folder with files. I would like to ask you now, and Lily, if you could also, yes, you just read my mind, don't you? I'd like you to go ahead and download these files. You might just download each one individually if you don't want to deal with the zipping issue. download them somewhere onto your computer where you can find them again quickly, because what you just need to do, you need to take them out of the folder, put them somewhere on your computer so that you can then upload them into AntConc. So I'm going to give you a minute to do that. You've got the link, go there, download them into a folder. When I'm at a conference or a workshop, I usually just do it on my desktop, so because that's the easiest place for me to find it afterwards. And maybe what I could do is I could ask you to give me a thumbs, or actually raise your hands. And then when you are done downloading the files, you can put your hands down. That way I know that you're ready to go. So if everyone who is doing the steps, if you could all raise your hands right now, and then when you're done, lower your hands. And again, I would recommend, if you're on a computer that's going to allow you to do this, I recommend that you give it a try, because you'll see once you've done it once, it'll be easier to go back and do it again.
Is there a shortcut for downloading multiple files at once?
Yes, you can download all of them, and then they will probably zip them, and then you just have to unzip them. Just make sure that they're unzipped and individual files when you go to upload them into AntConc.
Got it. So I selected the files, downloaded, and it automatically went to a zip. Great.
Mm-hmm. And then just make sure that they are in a folder, and you're going to want to unzip them so that you see each individual one.
When I opened the file folder, I clicked on the first one and I held down Shift, and then I clicked on the last one, and then I pulled up the options, and it automatically downloaded them as a zip file. And then I think when I saw that the zip file was done, I did either the right click or the left click, I forget which one is which, and that it had the option to extract all. That's how I got them out of the zip folder. And I'm on a PC. I'm not sure if it's the same on a Mac.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I will lower my hand. I have the files.
All right. Okay, so now the next step is going to download AntConc. To do that, you go to this link, which Lily has up in the chat now, I'm sure. Thank you. Again, it's free. You don't have to sign up. I've used AntConc for years. I know Lawrence Anthony. It's a great site. And if you decide you don't want it anymore after the workshop, you can delete it from your computer. Every time there's an update, I end up just taking it off my computer and putting the new one on, and it's really easy to take it off as well. When you get to that first site, you'll see on the home page, you'll see where it says downloads, official releases. You have different possibilities to choose from. You can get the Windows version, the Mac version, and then Linux is for the computer people. I did a similar workshop with a computer science team at my university, and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to use Linux. I was like, okay, please do that.
Interesting. Well, again, that just makes me wonder where that dialogue is now. Are you still in touch with those computer science people? Do they check in with you, or have they gone on their merry way?
It was actually a workshop that I gave earlier this week. So,
yeah.
And we were focused all of the computer part was, they got like this. The thing for them that was a little bit harder was thinking about multilingual students and how they might be needing this information, which I have a feeling is going to be more the natural part for everyone here.
That's right.
We all take our own individual strengths and then learn the new things for us.
Mm-hmm.
So once you have downloaded that, you just say, go ahead and install. and it will ask you if you want a shortcut on your desktop. I put a shortcut on my desktop, and you might consider doing that so that it's easy to find today. But if you know where it's saving on your computer, that's fine, as long as you're able to get to AntConc after it's been installed.
So do we send you an emoji or something when we've got this? Because I've got it.
Okay, you've got it. And Emmanuel, do you have yours as well? Yeah, I'm not sure if others in the workshop are just kind of watching or if they're going along. If you are needing more time, please just interrupt and let us know so that I slow down and give you some time to do that. The next step is just opening AntConc. So if you have the shortcut on your desktop, double click on the Ant. If it's not on your desktop, you just open the app, go to your apps, search for AntConc, and you will be able to open it from there. Oh, your computer is slow. Oh, well, I understand the slow computer.
Everybody can relate.
Mm-hmm. And of course, I always find that my computer can be okay, except when I'm in a workshop. And then for some reason it decides, oh, I'm going to update something randomly. Like Skype suddenly needs to be updated, even though I haven't used it for 2 years. So, but I do want to make sure that everyone who wants to follow along is able to follow along. So if you get too far behind, you know, you can always go into a breakout room with Lily. Or you can always say, hang on just a second, I need 1 more minute. When you open AntConc, it should look like this. And then what you're going to do is upload those files that I gave you. To upload the files, so it knows what documents we're working with, you're going to go to the top left-hand corner where it says File. And in the drop-down menu, the very first option is Create Quick Corpus. So you're going to go ahead and click on Create Quick Corpus, and it will ask you to select your files. So you will go, it will ask you where those files are. You go to the folder that you put those files in. You open those files so that it can be uploaded. And when you have done that successfully, you will see the 19 files appear on the left-hand column of AntConc. If anyone has difficulty doing that, difficulty finding the files and uploading them into AntConc, please raise your hand.
If anyone is too shy, feel free to send a direct message to me or to Nicole. We're happy to help. I know some people don't like to, you know, call themselves out.
But that's absolutely true. On the other hand, please feel comfortable doing that. You know, I usually, when I do my introduction, I tell everyone that I am a technophobe. I never thought that I would get into corpus linguistics because I have moments with my computer where I almost throw my computer out the window. I like, oh, why are you doing this? And I just get too frustrated. But when I saw some of the cool things you could do, and I saw actually once you've done it one time, you realize, oh, it's actually not that complicated. But you do have to do it once, at least once. And for me, I need to have the instructions, which is why I have everything like with arrows, because I might do it once and then a month later, I've already forgotten, no, what was it I was supposed to do? So that's why I have these instructions for you. And it's something you can take with you after the workshop and look again later. But if I don't do it the first time, yeah, go ahead.
Just instructions are great. These are great to have.
Good. Well, and if you're able to follow along and actually do the steps, at least for me, it's like driving someplace. You know, if you've driven there once, you remember the way a lot more easily than if you're a passenger.
Mm.
Figures the Californian in me, I have to relate it to driving. All right. How is everyone doing? Emmanuel,
Ready to push more buttons, but waiting.
All right, okay. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and keep going, but please, if you would like to do these steps at a slower pace, we can put you in a breakout room with Lily, and that would be fine too. That would be great too, also. We would love to have you with us, but are happy to do that as well. We're going to go on to the next step, and that is to create a word list. So this is where you find out what are the words in my files. So you go to the top, it looks like it's kind of in the middle of your screen where it says Word. You're going to click on Word, and then you're going to go down to the bottom of your AntConc screen where it says Start, and click on Start. I cannot tell you how many times I'll click on Word and then I'll go, what's going on? Why isn't it doing anything? Oh yeah, oh yes, that's right, Start, because Start is way down at the bottom of my screen.
Yeah, and I totally did not see the word start at all. I was like, I don't have a button that says start.
Yes.
And it's partly because the interface on my screen anyway, start is only slightly differentiated by this gradation. You know, it doesn't really look like a button. So if you know this guy,
and he is always looking for suggestions. I've met him at a couple of conferences, and he's always saying, please, please tell me how you use it. Tell me the bugs. Tell me what you would like to see. And, you know, I think the corpus linguists who design the software are fantastic, but,
Yeah.
you know, they're not working at Google. So yeah, there are little things like that, and hence the yellow arrows, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah,
like,
absolutely. You know, where's the yellow arrow on my screen here?
Oh, sorry.
No,
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
kidding.
you need it on the
That's what
AntConc
he
screen.
should add. He should add yellow arrows. There you go.
Yeah, I'll let him know. All right, so once you've clicked on Start, then your words should appear in that big box. And you'll see, for example, the, food, and to. Hopefully it's the same list that I have because we're using the same files. You will have the rank, which is basically from the most frequent word to the least frequent word. You'll have the frequency, that's how many times the word appears. So in these 19 texts, the word the appears 658 times. And you'll have the range, which is how many texts the word appears in. Not surprisingly, the appears in all 19 texts. It would be kind of surprising to have a text, not impossible, but surprising to have a text without the word the. So you have this list of words, and you'll notice that some of the words are maybe more salient than others, but it's basically the raw list of all the words in all of the documents, and you can scroll.
So, sorry, so just to clarify, this then is the intersection set that does not include words that are unique to individual texts.
That's right. So I think what you're referring to are keywords when you talk about unique words. And that we're not going to get into because it involves, at least not today, because it involves having a reference corpus, and there are a lot more steps involved. So this is just the raw words that you have in your text.
The raw shared words across these multiple texts.
Yes, although if you scroll down to the very bottom, you'll get some words that appear only in one text.
Well, that's what I was noticing. I thought I see that I have texts like number 85 is the word said and appears in 2 texts. I don't see any of these range numbers equaling 1.
Oh, let's see. I need to go. I'm going to have to stop sharing my screen then to go take a look myself.
Have you gone
Sorry.
all the way to the end of the list? Because you're probably looking by default at the first 100 hits.
I am. That's what I was wondering. Where do I set that?
There's an
Page
arrow.
size.
Yeah, it says page size,
Got
100
it.
hits, and you can also use the arrows
Okay.
to move through the hits. So if you were to go to the end, I'm sure there would be plenty of words that are just in one text.
Oh, thanks very much. That was my misunderstanding, because sure enough, there they are. Yep. Got it.
And I'm going to go ahead and let's see. Sorry, you're seeing my whole. So here what I did, oh, and of course my Zoom thing is in the way. Okay, so here, if you can see my little mouse, it's set at the very top underneath word. It says page size, and by default, it's set at 100 hits. So the first 100 words. And then you're going to do the drop down menu to all hits, and then you get all the words.
I appreciate both of you helping me see what I had done or assumed wrongly.
And I appreciate the fact that you're willing to ask questions, because that's how we all learn and figure these things out. Any other questions before I go on to the next part? Okay, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen then with the PowerPoint or the slides. Okay, so, and Lily, if you could monitor the chat, I think it's mostly you giving fantastic tips as we go along, but if you see anything, just interrupt me. And everyone, of course, is welcome to chime in at any point. Okay, so now you have a list of all of the words. At this point, you can delete either physically or mentally the words that are not meaningful or useful for your students. Typically, what I do is I copy this list of words and I paste it into an Excel spreadsheet so that I have all the words and I can play around with it. We're not going to actually make a glossary today. I did that with Margie Wald in our presentation on April 30th, like how to actually create a glossary using a spreadsheet. You can do this however you want. I mean, you could just put it in a Word document if you wanted to, but in Excel, it's kind of nice to have it in these individual cells. The key thing that I'd like to talk about today is what words are you going to delete? So if you have these words like from 26 to 41, it, be, at, hunger, more, not, insecure, I will give you a just a little background information. These texts are about food insecurity, which you might have guessed when as you scroll through the words. And they're at different levels because we thought kind of a cool topic, and if you have beginning students or intermediate students or advanced students, you might want to use the text. Feel free to do that. So you do have different levels, but it's interesting to see that some of the words really appear in all the texts at all the different levels. So if you just look at these 15 words or so, what words would you choose to get rid of?
It.
Our basic grammar. Function
All those function words. Yeah, the pronouns, the prepositions, the articles, it, be, at, more, not. Usually for the word list, you want to keep the content words, although as we will see soon, some of those prepositions can be important when they're paired with a noun or when they're paired with a verb, like access to. But for the time being, I think focusing on just the content words is great. From a research perspective, it can be very interesting. Like I looked at political speeches, and so I was looking at whether speeches had a lot of we or I or you. And
Mhm.
there was a reason for that. So I was really into the pronouns. Lily, you want to tell everybody what you're interested in for your research?
Verb tense.
Oh, cool.
Hmm.
So you might be looking at different things depending on the goal, but if your goal is to just see what words are going to be important to my students, probably content. Although,
so
you know, what's that?
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to go back, if I may. Is there an interface control where I can delete the words, or are you saying that that's what I would do if I were in a spreadsheet?
Exactly. And it's really
Okay,
all you do
no
is
problem. No problem.
control
Okay,
copy, control paste it into Excel, and it just appears beautifully.
you bet. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so you've got some thoughts now. This is what I came up with in terms of the words I deleted, but it's pretty much what we were talking about. I deleted those function words and kept the content words. So now you have a word list. This is the fun part, I think. Well, it depends on what you think is fun. It's the next fun part. What would you do with the word list now that you have it?
Well, I'd like to see examples of that word in context.
Good.
I might use
Find,
it.
yeah, go ahead, please, Lily.
No, you finish, Vincent. It's okay.
No, it's just, again, because these are the tools that we've been talking about. So I'd like to see those n-grams. I'd like to see what the collocations or the likely collocations might be with prepositions for my keywords.
Yeah.
I was thinking, like, let's say I were to stop at this point, because there's lots of other things I could do. But even with this information, I would probably use it to distribute like an assigned vocabulary word to each student and have maybe make a Google Doc or like a Google Slides where each student has to like summarize that word or give us some information about it. And this would be a really good way to figure out what those words should be, not just choosing them randomly.
That's great. Emmanuel.
Yeah, I would also look at synonyms and maybe like which of these words are academic and which are not, maybe.
Absolutely. Great, great ideas. I might come back to some. I keep having thoughts. I'm like, oh, I want to go onward. But yeah, those are all great ideas for just what you could do to get started with just this word list before the next step. Before I go on, though, because we could chat a little bit more if anyone else needs some time to catch up. Does anyone need a little more time? Just raise your hand if you do, because we can chat about word lists for a few more minutes. Okay, then I'm going to go on. The next one is, Vincent, did you get a sneak preview of these slides? It's the sample sentences.
No,
So,
oh, okay, good. Thank you. No, I didn't.
So this is where we can see those words in context. To do that, to find those words in context. So go back to, you're on your AntConc page, you're on your word list, look at those words like health. If you want to double click on the word health, it's going to automatically open this page. You just need to double click on the word health, and it's going to look like this. You are now no longer on the word tab. You're on the tab called Quick, KWIC. That stands for keyword in context. You might have also heard the term concordance lines. Basically, concordance lines are the word you're looking at in context. So you see the full, usually like 10 words on either side, approximately.
Nicole, we have a question in the chat from Ava.
Yes.
She said, does the program choose the clauses or only the words and phrases like adjective, adverb, or noun clauses?
Do you mean for the word list?
I guess the word list is only for the words, right? It would be only for the words, right? For the short, phrases, I guess, right? We can say. Yeah, I was just wondering if we could, like, if the program can automatically take out, the clauses out of the text, would it be possible?
You are anticipating one of our next steps. I'm so glad.
Okay.
This is
All right.
this is
Great.
great.
That's exciting. All right. Thank you.
It is exciting.
All right.
It means that I selected some good things for us to talk about for AntConc, and it means that you
Yeah.
are like following and interested. So that's all really good. Yes. The word list itself is only individual words, but stay tuned because after our sample sentences, we will start to see some phrases. So here you have the beginnings of sentences or the ends of sentences. Occasionally, you can actually get a full sentence here on the quick, and you can also expand the number of words that you're seeing on the screen. But usually what you have here on this screen is going to be enough to see, oh, that could be an interesting sentence. But you want to know the full sentence, right? And so to find the full sentence, you just double click on the blue word in the sentence that you think would be interesting. So for example, if I decide that I want to look at line 18 and how it affects their health and survival down at the very bottom, I want to look at that whole sentence. So I'm going to double click on the word health in line 18, and I'll get the full file. To show you what one of them looks like when you open up the full file, it basically just takes you to that entire document. It opens up that entire document. The word that you're looking for is highlighted in blue. And not only do you have the full sentence where that target word was found, you have the whole text. So you can really see the full context around that word. Notice that now, every time you're clicking on a word, it's taking you to a different tab. So the tab called File is the one where you see the entire document. I really like to go back and forth between the document and the word itself because I like to always be looking at the context. So I think that that's nice, but just note that you're in File. So when you're telling yourself, oh, wait a minute, how do I get back because I don't like this example, I want a different example, then you just click back on Quick at the top, because you've gone from the Quick tab to the File tab. If you've decided, okay, I've had enough with this text, this full text, I want to go back to my Quick examples, you just click back on that Quick tab at the top left.
Here's a quick interface request. If there could be like a command 1, command 2, command 3, for those tabs, that would kind of be nice, because just one thing I try and minimize for myself is just having to mouse to tiny little places on the screen. Anyway, just throwing that out.
I think you're going to end up being a great friend for Lawrence Anthony. He would love to hear these suggestions. Really, he and he's always, so that's the one thing that I have to say, he's always updating. Well, because he finds a bug or someone makes a suggestion, so he updates the software, and then suddenly I go back and I'm like, wait a minute. Usually it's such small changes that it's easy to find again. But I have to say, I went maybe a year and a half without using AntConc, and when I went back, I was like, oh my goodness, everything has really changed. So don't go a year and a half without doing AntConc. It's like going a year and a half without going to your dentist. It's not good results after. So I apologize for the tangents, but I also want to make sure everybody is able to keep up. And so I'm giving everyone a little more time. Oh, are we recording? Yes, we're recording this. Lovely. Whoever's listening to the recording, you get to hear all of my crazy tangents.
Sorry, my interruptions.
No, that's good. So here you have the full sentence. One thing you can keep in mind, it's great to take those sample sentences, but sometimes I find that the real life sample sentences are real long, and it can be overwhelming for students, especially when they just want to know, like, can I just see it in a sentence? It doesn't have to be a long sentence like the one here on the left. You can simplify it a little bit without changing. Really, here I haven't really changed that much of the structure even. It's just I've gotten rid of some words that weren't really necessary. So you might consider that with your sample sentence. And so then the question is, once you have your sample sentence, what could you do with it?
Well, just to throw out, I mean, one of the things that Cobb does with it is that he creates an activity that's a close type, but he automates that. And yet one thing that's a challenge there is it's bound in this quick format. So for some students that can be a little overwhelming. So we could maybe make our own depending on, you know, application and users, or rather students. Yeah,
that's great. So definitely close activities, fill in the blanks. What else?
Maybe to define the word depending on the context it is used.
Absolutely, I love that one. So many words have multiple meanings, and you can give the sample sentence and you can have students look up the word in a dictionary, look at the 4 different meanings of the word, and then determine which meaning goes with the word in that sentence. Fantastic. Any other ideas?
it wasn't part of the, I'm sorry I missed the workshop on glossary, but again, you could have your students generate glossary following up that same point. Absolutely.
Yep. Really, anything that you normally do in your class, you could do here. A lot of times with my beginning students, I would have a sentence and cut, and I do this with kids a lot too. I cut each word individually. I mean, if you're still using paper, do people use paper anymore? And have students put them together to form the sentence. So they have to put the words in the correct order. For students who are really in a more beginning stage, you could have groups of words. So they're only like 3 pieces to put together. I mean, and really anything you could have matching the beginnings of sentence to the end of the sentence. You don't have to do it like, you don't have to reinvent the lexical wheel or the pedagogical wheel. You can take all of those old activities that we've been doing for decades, if you like them, and adapt them using the sample sentences that you found. So use your imagination with those sample sentences. And if you think of other ideas, throw them into the chat, because one of the great things about workshops is just listening to everyone's ideas and being able to take those ideas and put them into your classroom, often with a little bit of modification, but it usually sparks some ideas. So put them into the chat, please. Okay, the next thing, and this is getting at that other question that we had a few minutes ago, we're going to look at engrams. And here you get a sneak peek at what an engram is. Food insecurity, in the, of food, food insecure. If you're doing, so an engram, N stands for number. So you can look at 2 grams. Those are 2 words that frequently appear as a set phrase. They sometimes have a lexical meaning, like food insecurity actually means something. And in this corpus, we have the phrase food insecurity coming up 258 times. That's because that's what the topic was for all of these articles, in the range 15 articles. So you know food insecurity is a big, very important phrase, and it has content meaning. In the, not so much content meaning, but that's also important to know. Of course, in the, I mean, we're always saying in the. of food. Is that something that you want to talk about with your class? It might not be so important. So you're going to have to also weed through these to see which ones are important, but it's a great way to see which words tend to go together. To get these n-grams, you're going to go to the top of your AntConc page again, where it says n-gram, and you're going to click on start, the magic start, which I sometimes forget down here at the bottom. And notice also that if you want to change the n-gram size, you can do it here just above the start button. So the default is for 2 grams. That's where you see 2 words together, but you can see 3 grams, which 3 words frequently appear together in a fixed order, or 4 grams, etc. So you can find those different lexical bundles. What I think is interesting here is that sometimes you're seeing some combinations that are of lexical interest, like low income. Low income is a very important phrase to know. And it really has together, it has content meaning. Access to is interesting for a different reason, because people often know the word access, but sometimes make mistakes about what preposition, if any, to use with access. So these n-grams can be interesting for different reasons. Has everyone been able to try out n-grams? Not yet.
Well, you want to ask, we could do the emoji or the hand?
Yeah,
like.
or in anything to let me know if you want more time or if you're doing okay.
No, it's great. Of food insecurity was a 3 n-gram that had 14 hits, and I went to 4 just on that, and that's kind of interesting too. So, yeah.
Yeah, if you have gotten your 2 grams, play around with it, try the 3 grams and 4 grams. And I'm going to ask you, I'm going to go back so that if you want to see that page, if you're still doing it, but I'm going to ask you, what interesting n-grams did you find? What could you do with this information in your class? Consider what you might do with food security and likely to. In what ways would you teach those n-grams differently? Double click on food insecure in the n-gram window, or double click another n-gram in your window. What do the concordance lines show you about this n-gram? So when you double click, again, you're going to get all of these different samples of where you can see that n-gram. And what does that tell you about the n-grams you're finding? For just a minute, I'm going to go back to this page in case people are still trying to get to their n-grams on their AntConc. And at this point, if you're kind of done, you've looked at them, and you have some thoughts, feel free to unmute yourselves and share your thoughts.
So I clicked on one of the n-grams. I don't know if I've ever done that before, actually. Like, I didn't realize that it links you directly to the concordance lines, but what I noticed, so I clicked, I was looking at 4 grams, or maybe this is a 3 gram, depending on how you count it. And I was looking at the phrase health and well-being. And what was interesting was, you know, when you click on the quick, it shows you what shows up on the left and the right. And I noticed a pattern on the left where it tends to be some kind of possessive. It's not always the same word, but it could be like children's or persons. And I thought that was interesting, like grammatically, what might come before that phrase looks like likely a possessive.
And what I love about that is when you're thinking of sample sentences, or you're thinking of how you're going to teach it to your students, you've noticed that, oh, it tends to be with the possessive. I would strongly recommend that if you give other samples, or if you have a fill in the blank activity, use that same pattern, because that is clearly, the texts are telling us that that tends to be the natural pattern. That's how the phrase is used. So that's great to pick up on things like that. One thing I like looking at least for these texts, because we have different levels, I like, and notice that on the name of the text, it actually
Right.
says BEG for beginner, INT for intermediate, ADV for advanced. So you can also see that some of these engrams are frequent across the proficiency levels, and some of them you tend to find more in the advanced levels. So I think that that's also can be interesting when you think about what you're going to focus on for your class.
Yeah. And there's, I just feel like I see a glimmer of how a kind of rhetorical, you know, structuring of a text can be organized, and maybe as it relates to difficulty of a text for students. I saw a 3-gram food insecurity food. And so, you know, that's because punctuation breaks it up. And in the 6 examples there, it's just this kind of flat, you know, continuation of the sense of what is food insecurity, question mark, food insecurity is, or, you know, defining food insecurity is. Those are all the sort of basic approaches until the advanced, where they're talking about food policy councils. Everything else is kind of repeating this rhetorical device. But so that's just, it's great. It's great. It gives a lot of, as you say, analysis that I want to continue, but also not forget that I'll have activities that I'll need to generate for students.
Right. And what would those activities be?
Yeah. Right. Well, still working on that one.
Does anyone else have any ideas for activities? And of course, if for those of you who might not be, maybe you decided not to download AntConc, and that's fine. Feel free still to chime in if you have ideas on what kinds of activities you might use if you have some information like this.
Yeah, it makes me want to have more of a history of the term itself, but that's just this one topic that we're on. But it does seem like it invites, if we do get into these multi-word units, that's its own lesson too, isn't it? I mean, we can't separate almost. I mean, what are synonyms? I guess is something that can be brought into any conversation.
Yeah.
I feel like it'd be interesting to do some sort of like matching activity. Great minds think alike. I just saw that in the chat. But like separating the words that make up these engrams and seeing if the students can construct them. I think that might be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, fill in the blank, matching. I really like to, because I think prepositions are so difficult, and I think there are a lot of things that you can do to make noticing and using prepositions more interesting also. So after those fill in the blanks and the matching activities, I just like to have students respond to a lot of questions and ask one another a lot of questions. So one of the things that I do, and you could do this virtually also, back in the old day, I would put questions up on a piece of paper, and I would put them around the classroom. You know, I'd tape them up on the walls and then have students go in pairs from one question to the other around the classroom. And so they would, like, they'd answer a question, they'd have a minute to talk about it, and then the buzzer would ring and they'd have to advance to the next question. So there was one question for every pair in the class. And the questions would be based on whatever lexico-grammatical structure I wanted them to look at. So if it was access to, I might ask the question like, what do people in, like if I have a lot of students from China, I would say, what do students in China, or what do people in China have better access to than people in the United States? So we're kind of branching out from the topic at hand, but using that vocabulary. Or what do you wish you had better access to, something like that. And so they're using those terms, and just by seeing the question, by answering the question, they're practicing that preposition with followed by the noun. But I mean, again, you do whatever those activities you tend to like to do with your vocabulary.
May I ask, this is a little off track, I realize, because we're really talking about custom corpuses that we, make on the fly. But is this program able to work with, I think it's called metadata? I mean, corpuses that then have been tagged with part of speech, for example.
No.
Okay,
This
that's
one,
not a problem.
Lily,
That's what
I think it
Coca could
it
do.
is?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I believe you can load a part of speech tagged corpus and or an annotated. You can definitely do it with part of speech. I think you can do it with other types of annotation as well. It's a little bit trickier in terms of the searches. Like maybe I could talk to you about it at another time, because I don't want to get too deep into it.
Yeah.
It is possible, but it's not as easy as doing those kind of things in a corpus like Coca, but it's doable.
Well,
so,
thanks. Yeah.
Would it, sorry, now I have to know, would it ignore the tags for the purposes of a word list, for example?
That is a good question. I think there is a way to construct your search, but basically it attaches the tags to the words themselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'd have to be careful with how you like phrase it. Yeah, we could definitely get into it more. Basically adds an underscore and then adds the tag as if it were one word. So it makes it a little trickier to do those things.
I just saw the help documentation for AntConc, and I see that they do have some info on that.
Yeah, it wouldn't probably be my top recommendation of a program for doing annotated texts, but it's
no. Yeah, appreciate that.
That sounds like a good topic for a future Corpus Corner. And let's see, I see that Emmanuel, you've got something here. Oh, and Eva too. A matching activity with nouns. Oh, and I'm missing things in the chat. Oh boy. Okay, let's see. Matching activity with nouns only, noun, absolutely. And you will see we're going to get to some noun combinations shortly. Or finish the phrase with prepositions, absolutely. Write your own sentences, great. Those are all really great suggestions, Ewa, thank you. And then Emmanuel, likely to often appear as more likely to and as likely to. Maybe an activity where they notice these words before the n-gram and define how they're used differently. Absolutely, yeah. Depending on the level of my students, with more advanced students, I like them to use AntConc themselves. And I will tell them, okay, here are some words. Now find the collocates, find some n-grams, decide yourselves what is important. Maybe get them into groups, and each person in a group has to find like the top 10, and then they have to argue together. No, I think my word should be on our group list and your word should go, to decide why they're important. And they can have some really interesting conversations about, is frequency more important? Is it the use, like, hey, we're all students in public health, and so this is the word that's going to be the most important for us. So it's interesting also to hear some of their meta conversations when they get into the program themselves. But for beginners, I think it's nice to just kind of use the information, pick it apart, and present it in a way that is going to be digestible and not overwhelming. So those are n-grams, and I know that we're kind of nearing our end of time. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the last piece here, and that's on collocates. So I'd like for you to click on the Colloquit tab at the top left. Ensure your target word appears in the text box to the left of start. And if it doesn't, type it in and then click start. And I'm going to show you here.
So target word
So-
then is just the word that we're interested in knowing more about, right?
Yeah, so yes, so for example, if I wanted to know more about the word hunger, like what other words tend to go with hunger? I would make sure that the word hunger is down here where you see the yellow arrow. Make sure that hunger is in that text box, and then I'm on the tab Colloquit here at the top. So I've clicked on Colloquit, I have hunger in the text box, and I click on start. And for these texts, I get 3 colloquits. You get more colloquits, of course, if you have more texts, more words in your documents, but 3 is pretty good. So the colloquits for hunger are facing America and kids. That means that in these documents, frequently, when authors talk about hunger, they also use facing. They also talk about America, so that probably tells you a little bit about where the texts are from. And they also talk about kids. So that is some interesting information, both grammatical and lexical. Any ideas for what you would do with that particular example?
I feel like it would be interesting to compare the colloquits of words that seem similar. Like you mentioned earlier, like kids and children. I would be curious to know, like, do they have the same colloquits or maybe they have different ones? And if they have different ones, maybe that helps me understand the subtle differences between them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could do that with words that are similar in terms of meaning, semantically similar, like children and kids. You could do words that are similar in terms of being part of the same word family, like hunger and hungry. You could do all kinds of comparisons. Another example I have here, I'm going through a little bit more quickly now because I want to make sure that we don't go over time. The colloquits for food are insecurity, security, insecure, food, households. So interesting, that was one that you mentioned, Vincent, that you had food. Again, sometimes because there's punctuation between them. Households, secure, and household. So again, Lily, you would like to explore a little bit more about differences in how in the colloquits words are used. If you saw, for example, with food, so you've got a few more colloquits to work with. What could you do? What kinds of activities would you do with your students for exploring this?
I think this was suggested by someone in the chat. I mean, wouldn't we have for advanced students an option to choose which one would be more likely? A ranking activity in terms of maybe formal writing.
That's great. Other ideas? I don't know if you know the text, but yeah, textbook, Focus on Vocabulary by Schmidt and Schmidt. They work with the academic word list, and they have a lot of activities with colloquits. And sometimes they're just really, I would say kind of the basic or typical activities where you have to fill in the blank, you know, it's a closed exercise. Sometimes it is multiple choice, and maybe they'll give you one word like food, and they'll give you 4 options, and you have to choose the one word that could not be a colloquit of food, for example. So you have different. And then once students see what are those typical colloquits, they can write sentences with the collocation. They can ask questions to one another with the collocation. They can respond to a writing or speaking prompt, making sure that they use the collocation. They can do a role play where they use the collocation in the role play.
Yeah, and I think that's just a win for students. You know, they gain from becoming more interested in these multi-word units in collocates, because it will just help them be more productive.
Absolutely. All right, so applications and activities we've been talking about kind of along the way, but just a few last minute things. And all of these, by the way, well, almost all of them, many of them came from the discussion on April 30th in the workshop that Margie and I held. So I would like to say thank you to those who were at that workshop on April 30th, because some of these ideas are coming from that. So one thing you could do, discriminating between near synonyms or antonyms. I gave you a few of those examples earlier. Understanding multiple meanings. So match the definition to the quick sample sentence. And Emmanuel, that's one that you had come up with as well. I really like that one. Creating, and talking about slow computers, my computer isn't responding, so I clicked twice. Number 3, creating word family charts, security, insecurity, insecure, and then having students select the right form of the word, creating their own sentences, using them in a conversation, etc. Exploring other frequent collocations. So what you're going to get with AntConc is the frequent collocates of a word in the documents that you uploaded into AntConc, but not all the possible words that could go with that one target word. So if you wanted students to explore other collocates, frequent collocates, you could have them use a collocation dictionary. So there's a link to one. That link takes you to a dictionary that has found collocates using the British National Corpus, which is millions of words, mostly British English, mostly written, some spoken, but generally it's used as one of those very general corpora where you get a broad range of language. So you could then do matching or fill in the blank activities with those other collocates. You could have students find their own using the dictionary, or just kind of going out and investigating and looking at texts that have the words and finding words that they think go frequently with that one target term. You could have gallery walks with pictures representing vocabulary words and have students label those words. I think that's great, especially, or label those pictures, I should say. That's especially great at beginning levels, but it could be done at all levels. And it's something I like to do with my students. I like to have them take pictures of something representing a word. And even if you have insecurity, and they take a picture of something that they see around them that to them represents insecurity, you can get some great artistic pictures that way and have these interesting philosophical questions about what is insecurity and where do we see it around us. You could have students perform role plays using vocabulary words. You could have students summarize text and give a written or oral response using the vocabulary words. You could tell them, okay, look at your word list and use 5 of the words, or use this word with one of the collocates to form a collocation. So again, some of those ideas, many of those ideas came up on April 30th. So I'd like to thank Margie Wald and the participants of that workshop for sharing some of those ideas. I've included this here. We don't have too much time to talk about using your own text, but I wanted you to know that all that information is here on the slides. Now your class. So think about the text that you have in your class. They can be text that students read or hear. They can be text that you want them to write or speak. You could take like samples if you've had the class previous years. You could upload samples from other students. That's not as common, but it certainly is possible. And then to prepare your texts, you can't just upload Word documents into AntConc. Like I think all Corpus software, it requires text files. So if you have a paper document, you need to scan that document, save it as a PDF, and then convert from PDF to text. If you have it as a Word document, you can convert it to text. Sometimes you can do that just using Word. It will ask you how you want to save a document. You save it as TXT. I highly recommend that you just use the, it's like the AntConc file converter, because then you'll have fewer bugs when you try to upload the text. And that link is there. So all you do is you open the link, it will ask you to upload the text, and it will convert the files for you. You don't really have to worry so much about formatting errors when you're converting a Word document to text, but if you're scanning something like a paper document, sometimes it messes up the formatting. Yes, Lily.
I had a question. Does AntConc analyze the language only in English, maybe in other languages as well?
I believe you can do it for other languages as well. And in fact, I think I saw a whole discussion. So if you go online and you just do AntConc other languages, it will probably lead you to a discussion forum or to the help that Lawrence Anthony has already got up there. But very often there are little discussion forums there. So
the answer is, oh, sorry, Nicole, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think the answer is definitely yes, because it would work the same way. Like, it doesn't have to understand the words. If it sees a space before and after, it's going to know that that's a word. So I think it would work pretty easily with other languages.
Absolutely. I'm just wondering if languages that use different characters, I'm not sure if the program is able to read those and put them out again, but I would think so.
Yeah, I also, like you, I think there has been some talk about AntConc in other languages. I'm less familiar with it, but I'm pretty confident it's a thing you can do.
Yeah, I would say try it and or Google it, and I'm sure that someone has already asked and answered the question. And when you go to the homepage for AntConc, it's really easy to find Lawrence Anthony's contact information. And he loves getting questions. So feel free to just contact him directly. And we have just a few more minutes for questions and comments. And I do also want to say, for those of you who are interested in all things or some things Corpus, we have what we call Corpus Corners once a month. It's the last Friday. And I'm just wondering, Lily, did I get the time right, or is that Idaho time?
I think that's right. I think that's
okay.
Pacific time.
Okay, it's 12 to 1 Pacific, right?
I believe so. I will double check.
So our next Corpus Corner is a week from today, next Friday, and you just need to register. So you have the Zoom link like for today, and it's free for CATESOL members, and it's very informal. So you can come just to listen, or you can come to say, hey, I have just this one question, or I'd really like to do this. And we just chat kind of openly about anything related to corpora.
Wonderful.
You're right about the time.
Okay, good. So thank you all for sticking with it. And I hope that you found some things that you would be able to use in your classes.
For sure, for sure. Thank you all. This is so great. And I'm looking forward to the Corpus Corner.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you all for sharing your ideas as well. I always love participating in workshops because you come out of it you know, everyone just pools their ideas together. And so thank you for sharing.
Thanks, Nicole.